Hello, this is Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger with another California report. Now, over the last few months, I've talked to you a lot about our budget crisis. And this week, I'm pleased to report to you that the legislature, over 100 days past the deadline, finally approved a budget to close our $19 billion deficit. And I'm very pleased that it does not raise taxes, because I made it very clear I would not sign a budget with tax increases. And it protects our priorities, like higher education, public safety, foster care, and the list goes on and on. Now, I know you're wondering, why did it really take so long? Because this is no ordinary budget. That's why. This is a budget that finally includes reforms like I've been talking about. I mean, it was so important, those reforms. In fact, in January, I told the legislature I would not sign a budget without pension reform and without budget reform, because that's what I promised the people of California when they elected me and when they sent me to Sacramento. But let me tell you, it was a huge fight. I mean, I've been fighting for those reforms since 2003. But one of the lessons that I've learned a long time ago was never to give up. I learned that from sports. You see, I never, ever give up. And I'm proud that this year, Democrats and Republicans came together, fought through all the minefields and all the obstacles, but we got the job done. Now let me talk to you a little bit about the reforms that we got. First, budget reform. For decades, our state has suffered because we have had a lack of a true rainy day fund, which means that when we have bad years, economic downturns, that we had no money available to fill, the lack of revenues. We didn't have any of that. Other states have it, but California didn't. I mean, when revenues spike, the spendaholics in Sacramento spend every dime. As soon as the revenue spiked, they took all this money and they spent it, rather taking some of that money and putting it aside in the rainy day fund. Then when the revenues plummet, like in the last few years, we are left with huge deficits. This is bad. I mean, we're sending the people in all these programs on this roller coaster ride, up the revenues, down the revenues, up the revenues, down the revenues. How can you run programs like this? This is no way to run a family or a business, let alone a state. So we approved the constitutional amendment to go before the voters in 2012 that will smooth out our spending once and for all. It creates a strong rainy day fund, and it forces Sacramento to save money in the good years and to cover shortfalls in the bad years. Now, the other major victory was pension reforms. When I talk about victory, I'm talking about a victory for California, because California needs those reforms. I mean, today California has $550 billion of public employee retirement debt. Now, you heard me right, $550 billion. I mean, this is more than $500 billion. Over the last decade, pension costs grew by 2,500%. Yet our revenues only grew by 28%. You see, this is irresponsible, and it is crazy, because it takes money away from education, from public safety, from parks, and all of those important services. People are wondering, why don't we have enough people working in the parks? Why are some of the parks not open? Well, because the pensions have been taking away money from the parks and from education and all of those things. Our reform package forces current employees now to contribute more towards their retirement, which is terrific. And for new employees, we roll back these massive benefit increases that were approved in 1999 through SB 400. It was a mistake that the legislators made. They thought that the revenues will continue going up, but that's not what is reality. Now they realize that we won't have enough money to pay our people when they retire. Now, we also ended the outrageous spiking that is going on in our pensions. The practice of pension spiking has contributed billions of dollars to our debt. And then also transparency. Can you imagine that for years and years and years they've been telling us that we have 50 or maybe $60 billion of debt in the pensions? Then we find out we actually have $550 billion debt. See, because it was because of a lack of transparency. Now we have this transparency. This was an important part of our whole reform. Now, all of this will save our pension system up to $100 billion in the years and in decades to come. Now, while this was a tough budget, and it took a long time, we can be very proud of those reforms, which were absolutely essential for California's future. So I want to thank the legislative leaders and the legislators, and I also want to thank the labor leaders for working with me on those reforms and for having faith in my vision. So thank you for watching, and thank you for listening.